Good afternoon. It's 1 p.m. here in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, and this is The Ambassador, where we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics. I am your ambassador, Paul Mathenge. And now to our first story. Tragedy strikes again in Sudan's Darfur region, this time not from bullets, but from fire. Over 50 homes in a camp for displaced people have been destroyed, deepening the suffering of those already caught in one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, Elvis Muyodi reports.
Fire destroyed over 50 homes in the Mukjar camp for displaced people in Sudan's Darfur region. While no casualties were reported, the blaze worsened conditions for families already affected by the ongoing conflict. The fire comes amid fresh violence in Darfur, where over 300 civilians were killed in just 2 days. Fighting between Sudan's military and the paramilitary RSF has raged since April 2023, killing at least 24,000 people and displacing millions. Sudan now faces the world's worst humanitarian and displacement crisis. With famine spreading, the situation for civilians, especially in conflict zones like Darfur, continues to grow more desperate. Elvin Muyodi, GBS News.
As violence continues to escalate in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, families are returning to their communities after months of or even years of displacement are met with ruin, hunger, and uncertainty, with home destroyed and no land to farm. And limited humanitarian aid, more than 1 million people are struggling to survive, Triza Tengo reports.
In the eastern region of the Democratic Republic of Congo, violence continues to escalate, displacing families and leaving them vulnerable in an already dire humanitarian situation. As violence persists in cities like Goma and throughout North Kivu, families returning to their communities after months or even years of displacement are finding their homes in ruins.
These families that are returning home don't have land to cultivate and have lost their sources of income.
These returnees are faced with the hunger, uncertainty, and the overwhelming challenge of rebuilding their lives. Despite the dire conditions, families like those in Kibumba and Sake are determined to rebuild.
When we returned, we found many dilapidated houses. The luckiest found their houses without doors and without roofs. We used tarpaulins to cover the houses and crammed into them with other families. And that's how we live so far.
However, the road ahead remains uncertain as displaced communities continue to struggle with the hunger and unstable living conditions.
If we are lucky enough to return to our own village, we'll need to rebuild our houses, have food, household items until we can harvest the produce from our fields.
The international community's support is urgently needed to address the escalating crisis, with over 25 million people in need of assistance. Triza Tengo, GBS News.
Now, an exhibition in the Moroccan city of Tetuan explores life in early 20th century Morocco, captured through the artwork of late Spanish painter Mariano Bertuch. The month-long show at the Cervantes Institute opened on Tuesday under the title Mariano Bertuch and Moroccan Scenes. The exhibition marks the 70th death anniversary of Bertuch, who was born in 1884 and passed away in 1955. Bertuch was fascinated by the Moroccan culture during his travel through the North African country in the early 1900s. The lives of people in Morocco, street scenes, markets, buildings, and landscape became the subject of his work.
What's important about Mariano Bertucci in Morocco, and particularly in the north of Morocco, is that he managed in a certain way to show the essence of Moroccan people, especially through certain paintings and drawings that represent the daily life. So Mariano Bertucci succeeded in doing this by showing the Spanish public what Morocco was really like.
Español, sobre todo, un poco cómo era este Marruecos.
Born in Granada in 1884, Bertucci travelled extensively across North Africa in the early 1900s.
The United Nations' new envoy to Libya is urging leaders to unite around the inclusive political process, warning that continued division threatens both economic stability and security. In her first Security Council address, Hannah Tete outlined the challenges facing the country and called the urgent reforms and nation consequences.
Libyan Special Representative of the Secretary General Hannah Tete has called for an inclusive political process to end Libya's prolonged crisis, citing deep divisions among leaders. While some advocate for a new unified government, others fear it could prolong the 15-year transition.
Most Libyan leaders call for an inclusive political process and note the urgent need to end unilateral actions, to unify institutions and restore stability. Some believe a new unified government is the only solution, while others argue that it will prolong the nearly 15-year transition period.
Tete warned that ongoing competition for economic resources, fragmented institutions, and the lack of a unified national budget fuel economic instability.
Libya's political crisis persists due to competition for economic resources. Fragmented institutions, unilateral actions which deepen divisions, and lack of a unified budget exacerbates the situation, causing macroeconomic instability characterized by foreign exchange deficits, inflation, and currency depreciation. In parallel to the work of the Advisory Committee, UNSMIL has been engaging economic experts to identify reforms for financial management and sustainability.
On the security front, Tete noted that the 2020 ceasefire remains largely intact, but warned of growing volatility due to armed groups in Tripoli and heightened tensions in the south.
The 2020 ceasefire agreement is largely holding, but the security situation remains volatile. Amid continued military buildup and hostile competition over territorial control, especially among Western armed groups, recent armed mobilization in and around Tripoli have renewed concerns about a potential outbreak of violence in the capital. In the southern region, the ongoing restructuring and consolidation of control of the Libyan National Army forces continues to fuel tensions with local stakeholders and resulted in heavy fighting and loss of lives in Quatrun. The situation will remain fragile until there is political will to unify security and military forces under a shared vision.
Triza Tiengo, GBS News.
The ambassador will take a short break. We'll be right back with more as we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics.
And the question of the day is, can you survive without internet?
Ngumu, plus kuachilia hizo story tu zote zikupite ni ngori.
Niwaambie ukweli. Like hii ni kama kuambia mtu mwenye alikuwa amezoea kushindana nguo, mwambie toa nguo ushinde uchi. Hiyo huku atriki kwa sababu sasa like ilikuwa imekuingia kwa kichwa kabisa.
Sasa unaweza kaa holi ya bila simu.
Kuspend hii most of the time kwa simu. Also you need to run skills. So nilikutana na later hapa nikapo-apply huko, and then I started learning skills, digital skills.
Yes, hadi siku mbili haiwezi.
Kwa wiki naachilia hata kama ni siku mbili ama sometimes na extend to wiki nzima. Napata shiki simu yangu.
My name is Tracy Otonde. I'm Miss County Nairobi, and I'm also Miss Embakasi East. Modeling is an art by virtue of the model and by virtue of the designers. That's if we look at modeling in terms of pageantry, you're showcasing yourself. You yourself is a work of art. You're a work of art, and you're showcasing everything that's in you and within you. And by virtue of the designer is because you keep showcasing the attires that they're made for you. And you have to look the part for you to be able to showcase what the designer was picturing. So yeah, modeling is an art.
Welcome back to The Ambassador, and now the United States has issued a strong call for Rwanda to withdraw its forces from the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo and immediately cease all support for the M23 rebel group, depending Washington's stance on the ongoing crisis in the region. During a digital press briefing, United States Senior Advisor for Africa, Mossad Boulos, and Deputy Assistant Secretary for Africa Affairs, Corina Sanders, underscored that Rwanda military involvement in Eastern DRC is, and I quote, unacceptable, end of quote, and a key driver of instability. Sudan is facing the world's largest humanitarian crisis after 2 years of war between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces and RSF. The recent attack of Zamzam, which has left at least 300 people dead, possesses the country's peace on the crossroads, as Davis Karani reports.
Thousands have died and over 13 million have been forcefully displaced. There are also widespread reports of sexual and ethnically motivated violence, hence worsening hunger crisis in South Sudan.
Is that even if tomorrow all the parties involved, they sign a peace treaty and peace comes to Sudan, the effects, the humanitarian consequences, the emotional consequences will go on for a long time. And this is something we need to be prepared for. It's not just the emergency response, but how can we already start looking into the longer-term effects of sexual violence and other humanitarian consequences.
A humanitarian activist describes how violence has impacted families, including a recent RSF attack on the Zamzam refugee camp, where fighters killed and tortured refugees.
Everyone here has the feeling that we could die at any moment.
Unlike the Darfur crisis of early 2000s, when it was on the agenda of many world leaders, the current conflict is being largely ignored by international community.
The biggest obstacle is not a lack of funding or tax at the United Nations. It's a lack of political will. Very simply, we have got to persuade the warring parties to protect civilians, to let aid in and across the country, and to put peace first.
Davis Karani for GBS Ambassador, Sudan.
Tensions in Gaza continue to escalate as Israel's Defense Minister, Israel Katz, declares that Israeli forces will remain in designated, and I quote, security zones, end of quote, within the territory, regardless of any future ceasefire agreement. Meanwhile, Hamas refuses to disarm, calling the proposal a potential political trap, further complicating efforts for peaceful resolution. Abdi Hamid Ali has more.
Israeli forces now control 30% of the Gaza Strip, expanding a buffer zone that displaced hundreds of thousands and restricted access to humanitarian aid. Strategic positions have been seized from the southern border city of Rafah to key corridors across the enclave. Despite mounting pressure from the international community, including alarm from the UN and European leaders, Israel maintains that its operations are necessary to neutralize Hamas's threat. Yet the toll is devastating. Over 50,900 Palestinians have been killed since 2023 and more than 400,000 displaced. The chief of Hamas in Gaza, Khalil al-Hayya, has stated that the group is ready to release all hostages in exchange for Palestinians detained in Israeli prisons.
Hamas is ready to negotiate a deal to swap all hostages with an agreed number of Palestinians. Netanyahu uses partial agreement as a cover for his political agenda, which is based on continuing the war of extermination and starvation. Even if the price is sacrificing all of his hostages, will not be part of passing this policy.
The path to peace remains elusive, with Hamas rejecting demands to disarm and Israel insisting on maintaining a military presence post-conflict. Israel's lack of respect for Gaza's territorial integrity puts the entire strip into crisis, with the civilians lacking food, fuel, medical supplies, and clean water. The humanitarian crisis worsens each passing day. Only time will tell how the situation will unfold. This is Abdi Hamid Ali, GBS News.
And now, some big news from Anfield. Liverpool captain Virgil van Dijk has committed his future to the club. The Dutch defender has signed a new 2-year contract extension, keeping him with the Red until 2027. Our own Elvis Muyodi has more.
Virgil van Dijk has signed a new contract with Liverpool, extending his stay at Anfield until 2027. The 33-year-old defender follows Mohamed Salah in committing his future to the club, with his previous deal set to expire at the end of the season. Since joining in 2018, Van Dijk has been a rock at the heart of Liverpool's defense, helping the team to major success, including a Premier League title, a Champions League, 1 FA Cup, 2 Carabao Cups, and a Club World Cup. And now in his 7th full season, Van Dijk is closing in on a second league title as Liverpool chase a record equaling 20th championship. His leadership and presence remain central to the club's future plans. Elvin Muyodi, GBS Sports.
In a renewed push to bring an end to the war in Ukraine, top United States envoys led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with European officials and Ukrainian leaders in Paris. The talks, amid at advancing peace proposal, were described as, and I quote, constructive, end of quote. Here is more on the scene.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with EU and Ukrainian leaders to discuss the current situation in the Russia-Ukraine war. The meeting comes at a crucial time as European allies express growing concern over Trump's softening ties with Russia. The mood in Paris appeared cautiously optimistic, with Ukraine signaling openness to a deal that could lead to both military de-escalation and economic cooperation. Trump has floated the idea of a mineral deal between US and Ukraine, framed as a form of repayment for the past military assistance, which could be finalized as early as next week. While Zelensky has accused China of supplying weapons to Russia, last week he stated that Chinese fighters are in Ukraine, helping Russia with the war. 2 Chinese nationals were detained.
Today we have information that China is supplying weapons to Russia. I think we'll be able to talk about next week, especially about the data we believe that China are engaged in the production of some weapons on the territory of Russia.
As negotiations move forward, with another round of talks set for London, the stakes continues to rise. The diplomacy at play reflects not only an urgent desire to end hostilities, but also a shifting global order where peace, politics, and profit intersect. But what's clear is that global actors are now more deeply involved in the fate of Ukraine's future. This is Abdi Hamid Ali, GBS News.
And that's all for today with me, your Ambassador Paul Mathenge, on the Ambassador 1 p.m. Follow all of our story at GBS TV Africa. It's updated through the day. We meet every Thursday and Friday as we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics. Thank you for your time and company.
Everywhere, GBS.